Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're happy to have you joining us today. I totally appreciate you taking time from your busy schedules, and we do look forward to getting to know you. My name's Kimberly, and I'm part of the QGIve team. If you haven't worked with us before, we're an online fundraising platform dedicated to helping nonprofits raise more money, and part of how we do that is through webinars like this one. Today's webinar will be about 45 minutes with a short Q&A session to follow, keeping our total time together today to just about an hour. We will be recording the presentation and sending each of you a follow-up email, which will have today's recording, a copy of the presentation, and links to other resources we discussed, plus a few more. So please watch your email within the next day or so for that. If you do have questions at any point, please go ahead and put them in the questions box. Our presenter is ready to answer and discuss these during the Q&A portion. As a special treat, we will actually be live tweeting the highlights from today's webinar with hashtag QGiveWebinar. So follow us on Twitter, and please feel free to share your thoughts. Let's just see. After today's webinar, please make sure to take the time to respond to a survey. In order to provide you with relevant and useful content, we do share registrant emails with our speakers. So if you'd like to opt out of that email, please go ahead. There is a specific question for that on the survey. We do know the value of relationships and are very proud to connect our nonprofits to our partner network to increase overall effectiveness and success. And today we are excited to introduce you to Kennari Consulting. We've proudly partnered with them since 2015. And here's an interesting fact. I did not know this, but Kennari means teacher in Icelandic. Today's speaker, so we are going to be leveraging the power of our organizations, QGIve and Kennari Consulting, hopefully complementing each other to help you. QGIve is comprehensive fundraising solutions, including year-round fundraising tools, text giving, peer-to-peer fundraising, and more. And Kennari Consulting helps teachers, staff, board members, and volunteers to be proficient ambassadors, engaging your donors in your mission. Oops, sorry, went one slide ahead. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our speaker, Laura, and I had to have her pronounce her last name, Kruisenga. Laura joined Kennari Consulting in 2010, and in her role as COO, Laura oversees Kennari's business operations and departments and ensures the company's growth is well aligned with its mission and values. And she also works with clients like nonprofits like yourselves to build their annual fundraising programs with a particular focus on events, communications, and staffing. So without any further ado, Laura.
All right, thanks. Well, I'm excited to be here. Welcome to you all. I'm sure I know it's hard to dedicate a little bit of time sometimes, especially at the end of the day when you feel like there's a million other things to do, but I'm glad you're here. I hope we can answer some questions and share some information and give you some tools you need. So as mentioned, I'm the COO with Kennari, and we have services primarily in the fundraising consulting space, so in campaigns, in grant writing, and project program development, and then as mentioned in annual giving, which is the space I live in. I've been in fundraising about 20 years, and we partner with all sorts of different nonprofits, all sorts of different sizes. So we recognize sort of some of those universal truths and then what's different at some smaller, larger, different types of organizations. We also have an online learning platform called FundKit, and that gives some great resources and video guides on real specific areas of fundraising. So if you're looking for more info there, you can check those out. Okay, so a couple things as we sort of dive in that we want to sort of kind of lay the groundwork with. And one is sort of how we define virtual events. I think that term sort of gets used a little bit loosely, and that's okay, but I want to be clear about what we're talking about together today. So some nonprofits, I would say in particular over the last year, but even before that, maybe had an in-person event that they typically had, and they had to shift to doing something online. And maybe the way that they went to was more of a digital communication campaign. So rather than an actual event where people came together, the nonprofit maybe sent a series of emails or videos out to their attendees and encourage their giving. You can go ahead and go back to that slide. And so in that space, a virtual event, that's not really a virtual event, right? It's really just a digital communication campaign. So, which is fine. And for many nonprofits, that was a great way to sort of transition and not have sort of all the work and heavy lifting of an actual event, but to still communicate a message and raise some funds. But when we're talking about virtual events today in this particular webinar, we're really talking about people coming together to raise dollars for your particular cause, where there is some kind of interaction. So it isn't just you sent a video or you sent some kind of communication, but there's some kind of interaction that people have either with each other, with the organization, or with the material. So that's sort of how we're defining virtual events for today. And really we're going to look at how do we encourage strong giving through a virtual event. So this isn't a comprehensive tutorial on how to put together a virtual event. Certainly we will talk about some of the important elements, but most of those elements will be the ones that affect your giving and the ones that help you build a relationship with your donors. So at Kennari, we believe very strongly in sort of building that relationship with the donor over the long haul, not looking at events or really fundraising in general as a transactional thing. And so looking at how do we build kind of the long-term together. And as we do that, we want to connect our attendees to the mission of our organization. So for us, success at an event is not only raising dollars for your mission, but it's also connecting your attendees to the mission. And that's in an in-person event, a virtual event, any combination therein. That's how I define success. So we want you to know that kind of on the front end. That doesn't mean you maybe don't have a different goal, but my goal for your events is always that there would be a financial return, so it makes it worth the energy and the effort and the cost, and that also there would be a connection, a deeper connection to the mission for those who participate. So that's sort of the baseline, and then we're going to dive into the details here together. Go ahead on the next slide. There we go. Okay, so if you would, we're going to try this out. We haven't used the chat a lot before. Throw in the chat, so not the Q&A or the question function, but in the actual chat, throw in the chat how many virtual events you have completed at this point. So you as a professional or board member or whatever your role is, not as an attendee, but that you actually kind of helped organize, either as an organization or as a person. How many virtual events have you completed at this point in the world?
I do see some folks putting those answers in to the Q&A versus the chat. So let me read off some of those, if I may, to you. I see 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, making it 3. We do some virtual performances, but not a fundraising event. None. None, 0. So it looks like the most I'm seeing on here so far is 5+, but everyone between 0 and 5+.
Perfect. That's great. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so that's great. That's a good point of reference. And it's good for others to see too that a lot of us are sort of new to this, even though you've maybe been in the virtual space for a while. We haven't had that many fundraising events yet. If you think about when you first started doing even just events in general, you get better at them, right? Every time you do them. So give yourself some grace that you're new at this. You can go ahead to the next slide. So yeah, I think that the key piece on the front end is to make sure that your messaging around strong giving is that this is still a fundraiser. And we've seen a little bit of drift from that in the last year. I think certainly virtual events are a little bit more accessible, right? There might not be as many barriers to attending. People don't have to travel. If your audience isn't all local, that's less of a barrier. Certainly there isn't maybe as much of a cost barrier. Many nonprofits have done their virtual events without a cost. And so maybe that has eliminated a barrier for some of your audience. But even though it's great to get more people to participate, we still want to share the message that this is an important fundraiser for the organization and that these funds do important things kind of for our mission. So we don't want to lose sight of, hey, learn about us. Anybody can get on. There's no cost to participate. We want you to join us. That's okay. But if we don't talk about that, the point of this particular fundraising event is to raise dollars, then people are going to get surprised by that. And you do not want your attendees to be surprised, because some people feel like, well, we don't want to scare people away. We'd rather they came on and learned, and it's okay if they don't give, which can be true, but in most cases, that doesn't scare people away. But when you get people into an event and then there is a real fundraising sort of push or ask or sort of feel, people are uncomfortable and feel a little bit like they've been tricked. And so that is not a space we want to be in. So you're really better off just being clear. Now, it doesn't have to be all about money and all about asking on the front end, but you do want to be clear. This is a fundraiser, and we're going to offer an opportunity for you to support our work. And so the other great thing you could do is to really highlight the impact of the dollars. This is, I would say, a little different than in-person events. But in in-person events, I would say typically the fundraising is a little bit more general, right? You're just sort of supporting the event. It isn't necessarily tied to something. But in a virtual event, it's more important that you connect it to the impact of the dollars. So for some organizations, that means finding a line item in your budget and saying, okay, we're going to raise money to kind of support this piece of our work. I would definitely do things that are within your budget. It doesn't need to be things above and beyond, but things you're already spending money on. How can you highlight, this is the kind of piece we're carving out from this? You might also look at, okay, how much does this typically raise, and how many people can we impact with that amount of money, or how many programs can we offer? And maybe you say, this event supports this many people participating in our programs, or something like that. So just giving people a sense. Again, that's a little difference in in-person events to virtual events. That element of what is this doing seems to be more important in a virtual event than it is in an in-person event. So something just to be aware of as you're starting kind of your communication. As you think about your plan to reach out to donors and kind of get the word out, we're really encouraging nonprofits to plan ahead. And that seems like, of course, we know that, right? But there's lots going on. And the reality is, people have continued to sort of report, self-report, and in some other sort of studies, report that they are, it's very difficult to get their attention. So people continue to be inundated by messages. It's harder to get people's attention than it was 18 months ago. And there's just this sort of excess of information that's coming at people, in particular, that's coming at them electronically. So we really are encouraging organizations, as you think about your event, is to make sure you're really communicating in a lot of different ways. Because if you're only emailing people, even though it's a virtual event and you feel like, okay, but they're going to participate online, it seems natural to have electronic communication, and that's for sure true. But a lot of your donors don't read your emails, right? A great open rate is like 25%. Well, that means 75% of your people aren't opening every email. So we have to sort of build around that. And that doesn't mean email isn't important. It's super important, but we need the other things too. So you might look at personally making calls and reaching out, especially to last year's donors or people that have participated, and say, hey, did you get the invitation? We sent it in your email. We'd love for you to be there. Making those personal phone calls, although it can be a little bit time consuming, it's got a huge return. And it makes donors and your supporters feel like, oh, they care if I'm there and they've noticed me. So it's a great point of cultivation, even if that person doesn't actually come to the event. And it helps get them to the event. So doing personal calls or personal notes, certainly mailing an invitation can be a good idea. Personal emails are okay too, although again, because there's so much electronic communication, sometimes that's not as helpful. But doing that personal reach out, and as you're looking at your list of last year's donors and people that supported, that might also help you identify a match gift that you can offer. again, it's hard to get people's attention. And so one way to sort of rise above that noise is by securing a match gift. We know donors are motivated by match gifts. That's true in campaigns and events and virtual events and pretty much every space. I'm not sure we've seen a fundraising space where a match isn't a motivator. So securing a match gift, not only can it help you raise more dollars, but it can get people's attention. And then they say like, oh yeah, I want to do that because I want my gift to be matched. So it's just a great way, a great attention getter. It also is a great thing to do for your previous year donors to say, hey, would you consider making this gift again? And we can leverage it as a match or a challenge or to start us strong. It also is a great way to engage with your former donors in that space. And it doesn't have to be a huge match. So we really encourage our clients to look at donors that are in that kind of 5, 10, 15, 20, $50,000 range. For some of you, it's like, yeah, that'd be great. We don't have that, but start at the lower levels and see what you can get. But it doesn't have to be one gift. It can be a pool of donors, and it doesn't have to be huge. You can just have $5,000 of match money and say, hey, for the first 5,000 we get, we're going to match it. And that's motivating to people, and it gets people to give right away. So think about a match and how you can use that not only to leverage giving, but also just to get people's attention. All right.
And I do want to say, if for the chat boxes today, if people can use the question box, and we'll be able to field them there.
Perfect. Okay, so in the question box, throw in there, how do your donors generally give at your event? So if you had an in-person event in years past, and it was kind of a typical event, I want you to think about how do they typically give for that event. And if you had a virtual event either last time or that it's always been a virtual event, certainly use that. If this is your first time doing an event, then you can just sort of wait and see what others say. So yeah, how did people give?
We've got online at our website, ACH, cash, sponsorship, cash calls, in person, usually a check, POS, silent or live auction, online, mailed in, fund to cause. Wow, you've got Bitcoin with a question mark. Yeah, it's a bit of everything.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. That does illustrate, I think, perfectly. Oops, go back one more. I think we skipped ahead. Yeah, there you go. That does illustrate the need to sort of diversify how you communicate with your donors and potential donors for this event. We do find that many event donors, typical in-person event donors, write a check or fill out their credit card info at the event. That's how many of them give. Now, some will do a text to give, some will go to your website, which is great. And more are doing that. That's for sure growing. But there are still a lot of donors that give by writing a check. And so we don't want to sort of exclude them or assume that they're going to be comfortable going online. Now, that said, I would say in the last year, many nonprofits that really did not have strong online giving have seen a huge growth in that. So I think the pandemic and people being sort of at home sort of required people to get comfortable with that, which in many ways I think was a good thing. So there are more donors now than there were 18 months ago that will give online, no doubt about it. And so we want that to be an option, but it can't be the only option. And so thinking about sending a letter to them and asking them to participate and renew their support. I got a couple letters this past fall, and one of them said, hey, thank you so much for coming to the event last year. We appreciated your gift of X. Here's what we did with the event funds, and this is the impact your giving and collective giving had. We're excited about this year. It's going to look different. Here's what we're doing. We hope you will participate, and we hope you will renew your support. As a donor, it's helpful because sometimes we don't remember how much we gave. And I want to renew my support, especially in this last year when so many nonprofits were sort of struggling or in a space of uncertainty. So I think that's important to remember that if you remind people how much they gave, it might help them give that again. So think about a specific ask. It can just be a letter. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And you can certainly send your previous donors your typical remittance envelope. So if you see that they've registered for your event, you can say, hey, we're looking forward to having you. So excited that you're going to be a part of this event. we'd love for you to make a gift. If you'd like an envelope, here's one. You can also give online or text this number or whatever that looks like for you. So, so thinking about how can you make it easy and eliminate any barrier there might be. We want donors to be able to give however they want to give. And so making sure that we have that. Another, I think, sort of strategy that has worked is to encourage your previous year donors to give ahead of time to help you sort of start strong. So I think, again, this is a difference that we found in virtual events versus in-person events. In many in-person events outside of sponsorship, and just your typical kind of day of giving, we would sort of lead a program and then culminate with an ask. So you might have a few compelling things, culminate with an ask, and that's near the end typically. And that's a great model in many ways for in-person events. But for virtual events, that isn't the right model. And so we want to make sure that you have giving opportunities all along the way for whenever that person is ready to give. And sometimes it's before the event. And what we're finding is people still come to the event. It's not like, oh, they just gave and then they don't sign on. They just give because they want to know they supported, and then they certainly want to log in to see maybe the impact or what you're up to. So it doesn't really dissuade them from participating, but it gets kind of the giving out of their mind so they can really participate and fully engage. So that's sort of a difference that we've seen. And I think one that nonprofits need to sort of take part in, and saying, hey, email or mail something to your previous year donors and say, hey, give now and help us start strong. You can also give that day, and here's what that looks like. So something to consider. And I think there's probably not enough mail happening right now from nonprofits to their donors. And so that's something you just don't want to lose track of. Go ahead. You know, the communication, I think, plan and strategy around virtual events is probably the hardest part. Well, I don't know if it's the hardest. There's a lot of hard parts, but is one of the most challenging parts, because it's hard to know exactly what the right thing is. And there is not a universal sort of, this is exactly how you have to do it. But here's some things that we've learned. And we're basing this on organizations that had good participation from their donors and that had strong giving in their virtual events. So so it's both of those sort of, and when we looked at what are the virtual events that sort of had both of those indicators, these are some of the similarities that their virtual events had. So it's not to say you have to do it exactly like this, it's just these are some similarities that we've seen that I think are important for others to know. So one is keep your message simple and short. Again, people are inundated, they're getting a ton of email, they don't read carefully, they don't read long emails. I think we've all sort of been a victim of that. So keep it simple, keep it short, be really targeted in your message. And then establish your communication priorities. You know, we want to think about sponsors, especially if you're in a space of, we're not sure yet if our event's going to be virtual or in person, or we're pretty sure it's going to be virtual, but we haven't fully communicated that yet to everyone. I want you to really think about who are your audiences, and then what's the order you communicate with them. So you might share that first with your board and your staff, or your staff and your board. And then it probably should be sponsors next. So they definitely need to be pretty high on the list of people that kind of hear your plan, so that they are a part of it and feel like they're a valued part of it. And then from there, kind of go down to last year's attendees and donors and a broader audience from there. So making sure that if you aren't out of the gate saying this is virtual and this is the plan, but you're sort of in that, we're not sure yet, or we haven't totally said, then I really would encourage you to establish a hierarchy of kind of who you're going to talk to and when. And that needs to be a pretty short time frame. So don't like start and then 2 months later you get to the bottom. That's like a week or two time frame, but helps you kind of be intentional with that. And then another, which again seems obvious but sometimes isn't, is to share that clear information about how to access the event. We hear from so many donors and other participants that said, like, yeah, I couldn't find the email, or I knew I had it, I thought I put it in my calendar, but I didn't, and I was stressed about trying to get on there. So be really clear about how people can get in and give them that information kind of as many times as you can. So just a general rule as you think about communication and how to encourage not only strong giving but strong participation is the following schedule. So again, take it for what it's worth. It's not, it shouldn't be applied, you know, exactly like we have to do it this way, but it is a guide. So 2 to 6 months out, you know, sending emails about once a month about your virtual event, getting people excited, maybe sending a short video or a short picture testimonial, kind of this is some stuff you're going to see, is a good plan. Doing too much more than that, I think, can start to overwhelm your audience. And you have other organizational emails and communication going out too, so you don't want to be too much on top of that. So, and then about a month ahead, you want to look at about 1 to 2 a week. Again, it depends on your audience, depends on your setup, but that's about the right amount for that month before, 30 days-ish before your event. Thinking about 1 to 2 a week. Again, highlighting this is how you do it, encouraging people to participate, certainly encouraging people to RSVP if they haven't. That's another sort of side note on virtual events that we've seen to be effective, is to encourage RSVP. Again, sometimes it feels like, well, if we're just doing a Facebook Live or we're just putting something on YouTube, you know, do we really need their RSVP? Well, you don't really need it, but it does sort of, it changes the donor's commitment to participating if they tell you they're going to participate. So encouraging an RSVP, we have found to be really helpful. It also helps you segment your messages, so then you can talk to those people differently. Hey, we're excited that you're coming, versus, hey, will you please sign up? So again, I think encouraging RSVP makes some sense, and you can do that in that 2 to 6 month range, or even in that 1 month ahead range, especially if you don't have a kind of tangible benefit that they're getting alongside of the event. And then certainly sending a reminder the day before. I think an hour before is helpful. We've all sort of been the person that's digging in their email, like, where's the link? So looking for that, I think, is, you just don't want people digging. You want it to be easy. You want it to be simple. And so sending a couple emails with, here's the link, that's it, just real brief. So it's real clear. And then always providing contact information for, if you're having trouble, call this number, and making sure you have someone that is that number for people, so that they're available to help try to kind of troubleshoot. Most challenges are not super complicated. It's just they needed someone to walk them through it. So I actually served that for one of our clients. I served as their sort of backup tech person. They had a person that was sick and needed some help, and I only got one phone call, and I was able to solve the problem for them. And I'm not a super techie person, so but just having someone they could call, and they were like, oh, this is so helpful, thank you so much. You know, I had them restart their computer and then click on the link again, and it worked. So you don't have to be a super tech genius to solve many problems, but it's so nice for a phone number to be available to your donors and your participants if they are having trouble. So okay, so in the question box, if you'll put, will your virtual event have a live element or only pre-recorded content? So we're talking content now, not any kind of like chat or something like that. So we're talking like, will there be a live person talking like right now? Or will it all be a pre-recorded video that you'll share to an audience that could be together live, but the actual content isn't live? So all
And
live.
the answers are rolling in, and it looks like a lot of people are doing a combination, both. Some people are still undecided, and a combination.
Yeah.
I'm going to say about 90% are a combination, but there are a few that are pre-recorded all the way, or yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful. You know, that's also a question we get a lot, you know, which one do we do, which one do we need? And we're gonna talk a little bit about that, and kind of what some of those pros and cons are. But I think you'll find that it might not matter as much as you think. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So the key in any virtual event is active participation. And that's more than just somebody watching something. So what we don't want is a participant just sitting and watching. We want them engaged. And so there's different ways to do that. I would say the most common way is through the comment chat feature, where there's some kind of back and forth, and potentially participants can interact with each other. Certainly they can interact with the organization in that space. That doesn't require live video, right? You don't have to have that to have active participation in a chat or comment feature. So that's certainly doable without that. You can have active participation with a live person, which definitely, I think, increases participation and engagement, but it's not essential to have that. So for some organizations, that's a real heavy lift to have that live piece. And there's also some real tech, I think, potential dangers with live, right? Technology, there's always that. I mean, there is with pre-recorded too, but it's more so with live. So thinking through, is there a return? What's the risk? What's the benefit? And does it really make sense for our group? I think is important to think through. I think you can have live, but if your live person is only really talking to a video screen and there is no audience engagement or Q&A or any kind of back and forth, it really could have been pre-recorded. And it's not really different to the attendee. They don't know that that was pre-recorded or live. So if you can't really tell, then you probably didn't need a live element. So that's something to think about in there. I think the events that have been, I would say, done it the best, where they had live, a live sort of element, is the ones that use the live element as sort of their MC, or sort of the person that was kind of transitioning from space to space. So most of their content was pre-recorded, and they shared different videos or different PowerPoints, different things like that. But they had a live sort of MC. I actually think the ones that did it the best had a live partner MC where there was some interaction and you could sort of feel like people were together. That was kind of a cool element. So thinking about that, I think, is important. But you don't need live content to have a live feel. And you can do that in your comment and chat area for sure. You also can consider what we call a to-go box of materials. So some organizations feel like we just do not have an audience, or we potentially just don't have the staff capacity to really support an online event kind of platform. So they kind of go this to-go box route, which still has engagement, but it's a little different. So I'm going to kind of explain how one organization did it and how it worked for them, so you have a little better sense. So the particular organization in mind serves older adults in their community, and they help them sort of live independent, vibrant, active lifestyles. So it's not a senior living facility, it's more of a kind of active senior center-ish. It's really a cool place, but kind of a unique one too, so a little hard to describe. Anyway, they had a fundraising event that had to go virtual. Many of their donors are also members, and so they have the unique challenge of they have a very their donor audience is an older audience. That's just reality for them. And so they just felt like, we just don't think we're going to get online participation. Not that their donors can't get online, but is that really where they're going to be most comfortable and where they're really going to actively participate? And they felt like that wasn't really the right answer. So they created a to-go box. They also happen to have like a cafe as part of their work, and so they did food as a part of it. They had like a take and bake dinner that people picked up. So as part of an event participant, you signed up, you RSVP'd, you got a to-go box. One was kind of this take and bake meal with all sorts of great sides and whatever, and they did it pretty inexpensively for them. And then the other box was these different materials that then each participant, it sort of guided them through an event. So it had like an info card about, here's what you're going to do tonight, here's what we want you to think about. It had a little cup that had their logo on it, and then in the cup it had a little tag about the number of people that they serve each year in their wellness center. So they sort of have like a gym membership program. So the different number of people and how they support people being active and healthy and want you to drink lots of water. So they had that. They also had some elements in there that connected to, they had like an adult coloring page with some crayons, like from the dollar store or something. So nothing fancy. And it wasn't just, hey, we do, we have coloring pages for adults. It was, hey, one of the activities we do is we encourage art and different fine motor skills, because in older adults start losing sort of dexterity in their hands. That affects a lot of their parts of their life. So this is a key part of what we do, and it's not just because it gives people something to do, but there's sort of an impact on their life. So they had these different like activities that they had people do, and then they had a link to a video that people could go to on YouTube. I think they just put it on YouTube, but some put it on Facebook and others. And then you could click on the link that they emailed out and watch the video. And then there was comments made about the items in their box. So again, they weren't in a live event sort of environment, and people weren't really interacting with each other. Most participants did it on their own or in their household, but there was active participation. It just wasn't sort of online. They delivered their message. They had a whole video. The video was maybe 15 maybe even 20 minutes. So it was kind of the whole program, but it was interactive in that they said, okay, take this out of your box and this is how that relates. So it was just kind of a cool example of a virtual event that looked a little different. So, so there's lots of ways to do it, but active participation is the hallmark of donors feeling like they're a part of something, which is such a critical part, and of people giving. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about how to kind of structure your event. All right, so let's keep going. As you think about the event itself, I would encourage you to think about where and how you're going to be asking. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to sort of tee up all sort of throughout the event and then culminate with an ask at the end. That just isn't the right approach for most virtual events, although it is in many cases the right approach for many in-person events. It doesn't work for as many virtual ones. So, so rather than sort of following that model and just doing it online, we would encourage you to sort of think differently about how your virtual event will flow. And some of it is really kicking off with, you know, here's how you can give today, and these are the different options. You're going to hear lots of compelling reasons why you can support this and how the impact that you can have as you support our organization. Here's how you do that. You can kick it off. You can have different people remind throughout. Certainly, you can kind of end or near the end make a real directed ask and say, you know, we want you to consider doing this. But we want you to do it more than just once. We also want you to make it super clear and obvious how people can give. That again seems obvious, but if you don't put a link in the chat and you don't say go to this website, or you don't say here's the text number, or you can send your envelope in that's in your box or in your bag or whatever, people will forget about it. So make sure you're super clear, put it in the chat. I think that's such a great way. If you're doing an online, any kind of online platform that has like a chat feature, that's a great way to direct people to how they can give. And certainly I would encourage you to consider utilizing a text to give option. Again, I think this is a space a lot of nonprofits, especially small and mid-sized nonprofits, are new to. And it used to be, you know, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. Well, 15, probably not that long, because really were we texting, but 10 for sure. It was really expensive for nonprofits. And so I think there's so many ways that it's affordable now. Certainly QGive is one of those. It's a great tool. And if you don't have a tool, I'd encourage you to find one and try it out. They really are pretty accessible. And what we're finding is many nonprofit fundraising event attendees. So you have to remember that's a little different audience than just like online, you know, users, but nonprofit fundraising event attendees, most of them are participating on a laptop or an iPad. So that's your most common way that they're going to participate. And what that means then is they have their phone available. So most people are not watching the full fundraising event from their phone. Now some are, so certainly that's a factor. But what we find is if they're on their laptop or on their iPad, many attendees don't want to click away. They're nervous they're going to like get X'd out of it, or they're not going to be able to refine the link or whatever. So they want to give, but they don't want to give sort of from the device they're watching it. So that does allow a text to give feature being a little bit more accessible, because they can just grab their phone and they can stay right in the event platform and make their gift on their phone. And they can do that with a web portal, but making a text to give option just makes it a little easier. So consider that as you're thinking about the tools that you need as you think about a virtual event. And certainly test it ahead. You know, make sure you test it out and see what works, what doesn't work, what's the messages that come back, and make sure you have those how you want them. And then also looking at your website donation form and making sure it's easy to use, it's working, you've got the right drop downs, you've got the right suggested giving amounts. Again, it's so easy to spend time and energy on sort of creating the event, figuring out the platform, getting people to attend, and those are all important pieces. But if we don't kind of manage the back end, we end up with trouble. So you test your forms, make an online gift, make sure that confirmation email makes sense, that kind of stuff. Do all that stuff ahead of time, and it'll be well worth it. And then really looking at any kind of auto-generated receipt, email, that sort of thing, is look at those. I think we probably don't look at those enough in general, but certainly look at those before a virtual event. You will definitely have more online and text giving in a virtual event than in an in-person event. I shouldn't say definitely. I would say most nonprofits will have that. So definitely testing out those forms is really important so that you know you're ready to roll, and knowing that your volume is going to be higher at this time. So we don't want to end up like, oh shoot, we should have updated that receipt letter. And now we have 50 people that just got it. So it's a great problem because you just had 50 donors, but you'd rather they had an updated form. So, all right. The last sort of piece to think through is, what's your thank you plan? And I know, again, it's easy to just get sort of overwhelmed with all the options and all the pieces you have to figure out as you go through the virtual event. But preparing a plan now on how you're going to thank your virtual event attendees and donors in particular is really important because, again, they're inundated with messages, and we want to make them feel valued. Again, if we're looking at our donors as partners in the work, and we're building a relationship over time, we don't want to just like get their money or get them to the event and then say check and move on. And it's easy to do that when we're busy. So preparing now for how are we going to thank them? What are the confirmations going to look like? But beyond that, how are we going to actually thank them? And do something different. Send some kind of unique picture, or if you do designate a piece of your budget that this event is supporting, and 6 months later you can show maybe some pictures or just like a highlight of, hey, this happened today, and because of our event donors, this is the outcome that we had, or this is the particular person that was impacted, or we were able to do this program or whatever. So send something down the road to remind them of that gift. And certainly scheduling now time to make phone calls. Thank you phone calls, I think, are probably one of our most underutilized forms of thank yous. They do take time, but anybody can do them. And so looking at scheduling time on your executive director's calendar, scheduling time with your board or committee, and saying, hey, we want everybody to dedicate an hour or 2 hours the day after the event or the week after the event to be able to make follow-up phone calls and just say, hey, thank you for being there. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your gift. And having a conversation. In many cases, they'll be leaving a message, but that's still meaningful. It's a great point of cultivation. It's also a great activity for your board and volunteers and even other staff to do. It's pretty easy to do a thank you call. You're not asking for anything. You can kind of script it out. It's pretty simple. And it can get your board engaged in a way that maybe they haven't been before. So we've definitely worked with some board members who were pretty hesitant to participate in fundraising, I would say, in general, and frankly not super productive in that space. And when they started making thank you calls, that started helping them kind of see the value of that individual reach out and the value of sort of that donor relationship, and that it was easy to do. I think they were surprised at how grateful donors were and how easy it was. And so that was, for them, it was a key step in them getting a little more engaged. So not the primary purpose, but kind of a nice side benefit, if you will. So really make that thank you plan now and dedicate your time to it. Okay, so that sort of is a lot of information in a short little amount of time. We do want to make sure that we get to any specific questions, whether it's on things we've covered or other things related to virtual events that you have questions on. Let me know.
And we do have some questions that have been coming in.
Okay.
So David asks, if people give in advance, does that mean we should set a lower goal for the event itself or still push both equally as hard?
Yeah, number one, I would sort of count it all toward that event. So if you're sending an appeal or a letter that says, hey, you gave before, or will you consider giving to support this, come to this event, I would sort of count that all toward the event, whether they give at the event or ahead of time. To me, the stimulus is the event. So I would count it all as one thing, but I definitely think if you typically have like a day of goal, this night we're trying to raise $15,000, and typically you don't raise a lot ahead, then yes, I would definitely adjust your day of goal. I might not go all the way down, but I would go down a little bit.
All right, Scott asks, are donors who give early giving more, the same, or less than the previous year?
Yeah, so far it's been, I would say, about the same. And that's been true even for day of. We're seeing an average gift that's about the same, but we're seeing the participation in donating is a little bit lower. So people are still giving the same amount. It's just not quite as many people are typically giving virtually. So you need more people in the room to get the same amount of money.
All righty. Heidi's question is sell or not sell tickets for the free online event?
Yeah, I know. Isn't that the $1,000,000 question? I think it does depend on your event, but we have found unless there's some kind of tangible benefit that they get in sort of attending, then it doesn't probably make sense to sell a ticket. So in that example of the organization that did the to-go box and the meal, they did sell tickets, and they actually sold more tickets this year, which was kind of funny. So they did sell tickets, and you had to pay to participate, and sponsors, obviously got that included with their sponsorship, but they did sell. We've had some other clients too who did like a meal deal, or you got like a gift card to a restaurant or something. So there was some kind of benefit with it. If there isn't that tangible benefit, I think then it's probably doesn't make as much sense. But certainly if there's a tangible benefit, I say keep your ticket price and keep it the same.
Okay. Vicky's question is, what technology do you use? Zoom, telephone, town hall, something else?
Yeah, so we've seen them all, I would say. We have seen quite a few in Zoom. We've seen quite a few on Facebook and YouTube, and there's a couple other platforms too. One of them is called Remo. It's REMO. We have seen some great success with it. It's not super expensive. It's got a real kind of event feel to it. So I think that's a platform that you should check out if you don't have one. And then there's another one called Be Live, so BE and then Live, and that's another kind of good tool for more of a live kind of streaming function. So yeah, those are the ones I've seen, but you can email too if you have more questions about platforms. We've seen a ton, and I would say most of them have pros and cons, so there's no perfect one. Although I love Remo. That's probably my favorite right now.
All right. Sherry is asking, fundraising attendees typically give to multiple charities. Yes. Is that demographic still considered mostly over 50 years old?
Um, I guess I don't, the demographic for donors certainly skews older in general. We are seeing better participation from younger audiences in events, in virtual events. So where the event in the past maybe skewed a little older, this past year they were able to get a little bit of a younger audience. So I think there is some of that happening. But it's not a ton. People aren't picking up a ton. So yeah, I think it's still a pretty similar crowd from what we've seen.
And then Lisa's question is, could you elaborate on update all emails?
Yeah, so I think that's in reference to the receipt. So a lot of times when you register for something, so if you're using some kind of registration software or like an Eventbrite or whatever, that whatever that auto email is, making sure that there's like an update there. Is that what you're talking? Oh, maybe you're thinking more kind of along the way. I guess I'm not sure. I need a clarifying question.
So maybe if Lisa can put a follow-up, and if I see that, we
Yeah,
can go
thanks.
back. Monique's asking, have you found nonprofits utilizing Venmo?
We haven't. Yeah, we really haven't yet. And I'm not aware. It's funny because I was actually doing a little bit of digging on that earlier this week. Most nonprofits aren't in a space where they can take that yet. There were some that participated in their beta, in Venmo's beta for nonprofits to use, but we really haven't seen a lot of that yet. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would go there yet. I think there's other tools that are probably better for right now.
Okay, wow. I'm hoping we have quite a few questions. Wow. How do I convince my team to use a text to give, which has multiple steps, rather than Venmo, which they prefer? Our target audience is college and young adult.
Yeah, so I think certainly identifying your target donor audience is important. And if it is young adults and college students, I think you do have to make it easy for them. But there's pretty little cost, and there is also value in data. And so with a tool that facilitates on, like a QGive or other tools that facilitate online or text giving, that are made for fundraising, in many ways, you get better data, and data from a fundraising perspective is really valuable. So we can't follow up with people, and we can't build a relationship with people, and we can't turn them into long-term donors if we can't do anything else with them, if all we have is a Venmo gift. So some of it's not just like, what's the easiest way to give? You could probably make an argument that to get $20 or $100 from a college student, Venmo would be the best way. But is that the best way to engage them as a donor for the long term? Probably not, because you really can't get the contact info that you need. And so that's the case I would try to make. I mean, it's an uphill climb, right? I get it. I'm not sure it'll solve it, but it's also a cost benefit to me. There are other tools out there that you're already using that would be probably easier from a staff perspective to use and set up.
Should you leave a voicemail if they don't answer and
Yeah,
thank
for
them on the
sure.
voicemail?
I
So
think for
thank them
sure.
on?
And you know what's, it's, yeah, I think definitely. And I think voicemails can still be a great point of cultivation, even if they don't call you back. It's like, oh, that was nice, they called, and then they move on. So yeah, I definitely would.
Okay. Alex's question is, do you have any advice for how to highlight your cause or how to stand out from all the other worthy causes?
Yeah. Well, I do think highlighting the impact, especially through a virtual event, highlighting the impact of these dollars raised on your particular cause is a great way to kind of make you stand out, rather than just, hey, we're fundraising for this sort of general kind of cause. I think helps. Um, and I think honestly, the phone calls and the personal reach out and some of that personal touch base ahead of time is what will be most meaningful. So, making yourself stand out online is pretty tough. And so I think that's probably something that not all nonprofits are going to be able to do. But not many are picking up the phone and saying, hey, I hope you're coming to our virtual event. We're so excited to share with you the impact of your giving and show you some successes we've had and the challenges that we're still up against. People doing that are getting way higher participation. So I think, to me, standing out is make it personal.
Okay. Do you recommend working with production companies to create events?
Again, it depends. That's the famous answer, right? I would say for most organizations, and we work mostly with, I would say, small to mid-size, some larger, but their fundraising is maybe still growing or still in that space. I think for most organizations, that's not necessary. You might need somebody to help, obviously, with videography to get things recorded, but to have full-on production, is typically not necessary to get that engagement and to get that impact across. It's probably not necessary. So I wouldn't exclusively say no, but I would say in most cases, you probably don't need that.
All right. Amanda's asking, how do you recognize people who gave before the event? Do you recognize them during the live event?
I think you can. I do think, if you're going to recognize donors during the live event, then you definitely want to also recognize those who gave ahead of time. I would say best practice from our perspective is not probably to recognize them with like first and last name. So we've had organizations that put in the chat like, thank you, Laura, for your gift tonight. You're helping us make a difference. So I think using a first name is great. I think you want to be a little cautious with how you recognize donors publicly because they maybe don't want to be recognized publicly. So, but yeah, if you're recognizing donors in the event, I for sure would include those that gave ahead, but I'd be careful with how I did it in general.
Denise is wanting to know, if you are charging a low amount to join an event, but also want to raise funds during the event, how can you execute so it doesn't feel like a bait and switch?
Yeah, well, I think communicating ahead of time, that there will be an opportunity to partner further or to grow your financial partnership with the organization, or some language around that is probably important so that people don't feel like they're getting surprised. But also promoting it as there will be an opportunity to do this. There isn't an expectation, and it isn't required, and it's not the focus, but there will be an opportunity. So that's how I would do it on the front end. And then I think when you kick the event off, it's important to sort of set that tone too. Say, hey, we're excited that you're here. We want you to enjoy and sort of participate, and know that your purchase of this is making a difference for us in this way. And at the end, or at this point, you're also going to have an opportunity to make an additional gift, and here's what that goes to. So I think just being really open about it is the key.
Alrighty. From Alex, how do you feel about making final funds raised public? Could it discourage donations if it appears as though they've already raised enough?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, that's a great question. I think if you have a goal set and you're public about your goals, let's say you're saying through this event we're trying to raise $100,000, and you hit that earlier than you maybe expected or whatever. I think it's okay to still say, hey, this is our goal, we're almost there, but here's what we can do if we get to the next level. So to your point, yes, I think it can be, I don't know if it's discouraging. I think donors want to be part of something successful. People don't give to a sinking ship. So I think success breeds success. I would play that up. Like, look how far we got. If we go to this level, we can do even more. So if you get close to your goal or you feel like, oh, we raised more than we thought we were going to, I would make sure you communicate the additional impact or the additional need that you have so that it doesn't feel like, oh, the work's done and they don't really need my money. But success is great. So I think you hitting your goal and going above your goal is not going to dissuade donors if you can tell them why the money still matters.
Boy, I know we won't have enough time for the rest of the questions, so I'm kind of going through. How is a live auction component incorporated into a Zoom event? Is using the comments enough to track bids?
Oh man, I would say probably not. The only auctions that we've seen virtually used specific like auction software or at least online software where it could facilitate the bidding. I have not seen it done successfully in a Zoom. So I'm not saying you can't do it. I just think I think it'd be tough.
Libby's asking, how important is it to get mailing address info? The text to give form usually defaults to no address to keep things simple. Is it worth asking donors to spend more time filling out the form to get more contact info?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think giving the option but not making it required is probably still the right way to go. So I wouldn't require like a mailing address for text to give, but I would leave it in there so that people can fill it out if they want to. I think you're better off probably following up with some of those folks and trying to get that after. So if you get a phone number, I'd make some of that required email or phone number, something like that, so that you can do some follow up, but I wouldn't try to get too much. About 70% of people that start an online donation form don't finish it in just industry wide. So, that's something we want to be cautious of, is not making it too complicated.
Can you spell Remo again, please?
Yeah, REMO. So REMO, Remo.
Okay, I think we've probably got two more questions here. Perhaps my
All right.
executive staff is wanting to extend our virtual fundraising auction for several months rather than a couple of weeks. What are your thoughts?
I would say no.
Okay.
That's my short answer. I think it's too long to keep people's attention. And again, there's such competition for attention that is going to be really hard to keep people's attention for that long. So, and I guess I would want to know a little bit more about why, why would we extend it? But I think you're better off really doing a lot of lead up and getting people excited about it. And you could maybe use that as your sort of argument of, let's lead up to the event and do a little bit more pre-event than we typically would, but I would not have it live for that long.
Okay. Phone calls from Kurt. Phone calls versus email reach outs. Do you prefer one? Do people respond better to one?
Yeah, well, I think phone calls stand out more. And we definitely have seen a higher return on phone calls versus emails for sure. So yeah, I would say phone.
And I'm going to give you the most pressing, hard question to answer. This is from Sherry. I figured we'd end with some humor. Laura, is that a personal photo on the wall or a stock photo? She's in love with it and is totally distracted.
Okay, thank you. I love it too. It's a real picture. I'm in my actual like home office. It's a picture hanging on my wall. I have some drywall issues that you can't see, but yeah, it's a real picture. Thanks. I love it too.
So that's pretty much it. So basically, we weren't able to get to all of the questions, but we do have our contact information here. Thank you to each of you for joining. We will again be emailing out the recording of today with links. and some other great resources. If you do want to reach out to the QGIve team, I saw a couple QGIve questions in there, or the Kennari team. The contact information is here on this slide and also will be in what we email you. Don't forget to claim your CFRE credit. You'll get 1 credit for joining our webinar today. And if you haven't, please complete our survey. And we hope you got some great ideas and are on track for your next virtual event. We'll be in touch. And thank you so much to everyone. And thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Yeah, have a great afternoon.
All right. Take care.